Okay, this is the extra credit question I just gave you. Some people got that. I have suspicions about how they've got that. I do want to point out, though, that it's important that you're thinking through the problems. Now, again, I want to emphasize again, the problem to give you in homework, I say for the most part, they really don't require much thinking. It just requires, did you understand what I presented in lecture and in the examples? And then can you just do that again and again and again? Like, for example, if this is a question that, let's say we were teaching a class on how to solve this question over here, and then on the exam, you see the same exact question, I don't think that would be a great educational environment, by the way. However, that's typically what a large number of students are experiencing, where they're experiencing questions that are identical to the questions that they're seeing in homework and in the class, all right? And that's a misfortune, all right? So you have to realize in the real world, that's not the case. You're not seeing things, the same old questions. Yeah, it's like, I always say it's like Groundhog Day. If you get the same old questions, you're in Groundhog Day. I think with this pandemic, I think a lot of people feel like you're in Groundhog Day. But if I were looking at this and I weren't thinking too much, I'll be honest with you, the first thing I would do is I would say, gee, this looks like a Math 100 question. Let me just square both sides. But if you did that, I want to point out what you did in Math 100. If you saw a root equation, what your teachers told you to do was to square both sides. And if you did that, I can say it's not a bad way to start the problem, but I think I get into trouble right away. And let me point out what I mean by that. If I squared that, what would I get? X4 plus 2x squared root x minus 2 plus x minus 2. That's not so bad. And then what I get on the other side? I get 16 plus, let's see, 8 root 4 minus 2x plus 4 minus 2x. And then you look at this and say, what am I going to do next? Am I going to keep squaring this thing? And the roots keep popping up? So I can tell you, that looks like a really bad idea. So what I would do is I'd say, gee, I'm not going to go in that direction anymore. That just looks like it's too much work. And you're going down the wrong road. And you should know when you're going down the wrong road. So I want to look at it again. And by looking at it again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each side separately. I'm going to look at this side over here, and I want to discuss its domain. Now, someone goes, did we do domain in Math 119? Of course you did. So that's why I'm looking at domain. I'm doing something I'm familiar with. And what's domain of the right-hand side? It's when 4, and by the way, we're talking about real domain, 4 minus 2x is greater than or equal to 0. What do we know about even roots? The radicand must be a non-negative number. So let's see if we can solve that. Yeah, pretty easy to do. Nice numbers, by the way. And by the way, it's made to be a dead end too, but it's an easy dead end. So I know what this looks like. What does it look like? It looks like, I start at 2. And what is x is less than or equal to it? So this is domain of the right side. Now I'm going to look at the domain of the left side. And I'll put this over here. I'm going to look at domain for this guy over here. And then this thing would be when x minus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. What does that mean? X is greater than or equal to 2. Let me draw a picture of that. That's 2. And x has to be greater than that number. So then the question comes is, what do those two domains share? They only share one number. What number do they share? The only number they share. So the shared domain is 2. And that's it. I'm not saying that's an answer, by the way. I'm just saying that's all they share. I did not say that's an answer. I said that's all they share. That's the only real number they have in common is the number 2. So then the question comes is, I wonder if 2 works. I'm going to check it. And what would you have here? X squared, which is 4, plus the root of 0 equals 4 plus root of 0. What does this tell me? 4 equals 4. Does 2 work? Yes, this is a solution to a problem. How many did we find? The answer is there's only one solution to the problem. Only one. All right. I'm going to go to Sage. And I want to show you that I know some people, say, well, gee, I couldn't have done that myself. And I want to point out going to technology may not be productive. But anyway, let me try to do that. And give me a second to do so. And give me 1 minute. I got to get to my Sage instant. And let me get back to that question too. Did I close the question? Just give me a second here. Oh, question's right here. Yeah, I got it still. All right, I want to see if I can do that question, all right? And I pull on the side so it doesn't look like it's too much in the way. Reset, whoops. And there's a point to this as well, all right? I'm not saying people are using this. I realize that most students don't go anywhere near Sage. They go nowhere near it. So X is a variable. Whoops. We certainly talk about how to solve an equation using Sage. So solve, I'm going to type this in. So that's X squared plus square root. And we don't know much about Sage. I'm not saying we know everything about it. We know very little about it. And that equals 4 plus the square root of 4 minus 2 star X. And I want to solve for X. All right. And what happened? Sage is working on it, and then Sage spit back. Sage basically says it couldn't do the problem. All right. Now, by the way, with the solve command, I'm not saying there's not another command you could do that with that. All right. But what I want to claim is, I know what some students are doing. They're not, when I say that, I'm not accusing anyone, but I realize what some students do, the first thing they do is they go to the internet and they search the question. And certainly we give you a lot of time. So let me get to the internet. And I'm going to go to Google. And I got to type that question in. Someone says, what's the question? That's the question. So I'm not even going to type the question because I'm too lazy. I'm going to type in solve. I don't know what's going to happen, by the way. X squared plus square root SQRT X minus 2. And some of you guys got like Siri. You can actually ask Siri this question. Let me see if I typed that in right. Solve. I'm going to get rid of the solve word. Well, it said find a solution. Ooh, let me click this link. They give me an answer. Look at that. I'm a genius. Not really. I use the internet to get that answer. All right. X equals 2. All right. It does say that X equals 2. Did I do that by my thinking? Yeah, I did. And now I say, oh, this is a great website to go to. That I could actually go to this website and get all my questions answered. Again, it's a problem, and we know that's a problem. All right. So I want to talk what happens to a lot of people educationally. And what they do is educationally, what they're doing is especially with this distance stuff, they're really not, what I would say, engaged in something, but they know how to game the system. And, gaming an educational system is actually pretty easy. All right. There's, certainly a lot of evidence of people getting into, big universities and, big name universities. Like I think, I'm sure you guys are aware of that. I can't remember her name, but there was a big court case and some people went to jail over it because they bought their kids into these really prestigious schools out in California, not just California, but other places. Yeah. Can you buy your way into a good school? Yeah. Can you pay someone to, do things for you? Yeah, you can. You got to have money for that though. And I understand the internet's nice. It's kind of leveling field. I could get my questions answered by going to the internet. We'll come back to this question later, by the way. But you see that I just typed something in, I got this, all right? But here's the problem. Later in life, when you get out of a university, and let's say you got a degree, like let's say it's in electrical engineering, and you kind of maybe, I don't know, let's say you really didn't understand the subject area, and all of a sudden you're at a company and you're a low-level employee, but you're still electrical engineering. What they're going to do, figure out over time, is no one's going to help you there. I mean, if you think someone's going to do your job there for you, they're not going to help you, right? Now you might say, I'll go to the internet. Every job they give me, I'll go to the internet and I'll search on it to see if someone else has done the same job. It's not going to work out, right? That's not going to work out. So let me close this out. I'm going to say, I like the fact that there's a website up there that I could actually ask now. I wasn't aware before. And some of my students tell me about this, but I never go there, right? I'd much rather think through the problem. All right. So I want to talk about what happens when people get a degree from these really prestigious schools. Like, let's say they get a degree in engineering and they go to Tesla, for example, and Tesla, as an interviewer, I'm not saying Tesla does it, but they have interviewers there that ask people questions, and they're in a room alone with the interviewer. And what happens, they ask them a question, and sometimes they ask them a question, they're surprised by the answers they get, right? Like you might think that, everyone's a brain surgeon that's gone to like Stanford and they got a degree in electrical engineering, and you ask them a question like this one over here. I go 1 mile south, 1 mile west, and 1 mile north. I am back at my starting point. Where am I? This would take, I'm not going to say a large amount of understanding of the world, but it takes, like, I would say, like a grade school understanding of the world, right? There's an answer to this question over here. And typically what Elon Musk would say, he says most of the engineers get it right. However, he says there's more than one answer to it. And that's where a majority of the engineers get stuck. All right, so this is like a meme question. And the fact of the matter is, Elon Musk also thinks he's a really bright guy. And so he asks people other questions, of course, but they finally break the ice and they tell the people what the other answer is to the question. And then this thing gets posted on the internet. Musk can't use the question again. He can't do that, because what happens on the internet, everyone sees it on the internet, including people like me. No, I'm not getting an interview at Tesla. They're not going to interview me. I don't have a skill set to work there. I don't. But anyway, I think you guys know about Mashable. Mashable actually got it wrong. Now, I thought about the question and I was able to get the correct answer, but I'll be honest with you, it took some thinking on my end. But again, you can go to the internet now and you can see a bunch of series of questions over here of me doing questions like this over here, or somebody else doing them. But here's the problem. Once these questions are out there, they're not going to ask these questions again in an interview. But here's the deal. If you get a degree, right? I always say if you get a degree in an area of consequence, right? Let's say it's electrical engineering. You're going to eventually end up at a job interview where they're going to ask you questions. And the question they're going to ask you are not like, what's the capital of New Jersey? They're going to ask you questions to really test your understanding of knowledge. It goes well beyond standardized test. Like this question over here goes well beyond a standardized test, well beyond it. Because on a standardized test, this would not be a good question. I don't think so anyway. What's a good question on a standardized test? Kind of stuff that we're giving you. They're good questions, all right? They really test the boundary knowledge of what you've been given in math 120, 119, or other course you've taken. But if you get that interview, and this is where a lot of people get disappointed. And I always say that, I'm always trying to get you guys to try. Where does the disappointment get set in? When you get the degree and no one lets you try. All right. So I want to give one example, and I hate to give this example. I live in Newark. I've been living here for decades, and I've been teaching in Newark for decades as well. So, Newark's a tough city to live in. I'll be honest with you. It's noisy, it's dirty, there's a lot of crime. Infrastructure is pretty bad. I hate to even say this, but our government in Newark is not very good. Like, I really can't count on the police to do what the police need to do. Things like that. Fire department. I had a guy behind me, his house burned down. The fire department is in eye shot of his house, but his house burned to the ground. I wonder, how could that happen? Well, how it happened was, I guess the fire department didn't get there in time. There were people outside while this guy's house was burning with their garden hoses trying to put the fire out. By the way, I live in an apartment building, but there are homes behind me. This is kind of leaves a really kind of bad flavor to life here. That's something where you have a fire department next to a house that's burning down, and people are out there before the fire department gets there. But let me go to the real story. I live in Newark. I shop in Newark. I try to do business in Newark. When I say shop, mostly grocery shopping. That's most of my. I say that's a majority of my income goes towards grocery. But I go to Whole Foods, and what I notice about Whole Foods is in Whole Foods, I see a tremendous number of people working there. I mean, a tremendous number. I'm often shocked. There are more people in Whole Foods in Newark working for Amazon than there are people like me shopping. I find that shocking. So what are they doing? They're what's known as personal shoppers. They're actually shopping for people that are too busy to shop. People have got, I'm going to say cushy jobs. When I say a cushy job, a job that gives them enough money where they could actually pay someone to shop for them, right? They're actually paying someone to shop for them. They're personal shoppers. By the way, someone always says it's really not that bad. If you're an Amazon Prime customer, which I am, you can get someone to shop for you. And that's true. I could. All right. And get it delivered. But I always feel guilty about that because I always want to give people tips if they're doing something for me. All right. Now I realize Amazon pays them, but I still want to give them a tip if they're showing up to my house, doing grocery shopping for me, because I feel guilty about it. I feel bad that they're grocery shopping for somebody. But, typically when I'm in Whole Foods, there's a point to the story. Typically someone will say to me, "Hey, professor, how you doing?" And that's when I get shocked. I think to myself, that person must know me as a teacher. Why else would they say, "Hey, professor, how you doing?" So then I know that they know me as a teacher. Then I turn around and I say to them, "Hey, I'm doing okay. How are you doing?" And they're personal shoppers. So I know what their answer is going to be. Somewhat, they look at me and they say, "It's going okay. I'm doing what I have to do to survive." But I think to myself is, what a level of disappointment that must be. And by the way, I'm not berating anyone's job. I value all work. I don't see any job as being beneath anyone. I do not. I think all jobs are valuable. For example, I have worked as a janitor. I see that as a viable, good job. I've worked as a plumber. I think that is a viable, good job. I've worked in retail and I've worked many jobs. I'm thinking they're all good jobs. But I'm thinking the guy that turned around to me, and by the way, it's not just one person, it's many people have said that to me at Whole Foods, because I see a lot of people there that they're doing okay. They're surviving. But my suspicion is they've went on and got a degree in something and then got out with that degree, whether it was in computer science or electrical engineering, because that's typically the students I'm seeing, mostly computer science, by the way. He couldn't find a viable job that paid well enough. So he's kind of a personal shopper. All right. We don't want to see that happen. And the only way to prevent that from happening is if you become more engaged in your studies. So when you get to those interviews, that you can answer, and you can answer in a viable way. All right. So that's about all I want to say, with one other exception. What I did over here, I did graph it. I used my grapher software. I'll show you what that looks like. Someone says, "What did you graph out?" Well, I graphed out these two equations. I graphed this one out over here. That's one side of the equation. That's the other one. And I graphed the point of intersection. And that's where those two graphs are intersecting right over here. All right. Now, granted, I'm not going to say that's the best way of doing it, but it's a way of doing the problem, is to graph it out as well. All right. So I'm going to call it quits on that. I realize that seems like a long talk. I guess I talked about 10 minutes on that, it seems, or maybe even longer. But anyway, I'll give you more extra credits. But anyway, thank you for paying attention.